Alright, settle in, because tonight we're diving into the kind of story that makes you double check your locks, maybe even sleep with the lights on. You know that feeling, that prickle on the back of your neck when you're alone in a dark room. That's what we're chasing tonight, because some places aren't just old, they're hungry, they hold on to things, they echo with a past that refuses to stay buried, and sometimes you move right into one of them. This is the story of Mark and Chloe, and the house that whispered their names long before they ever stepped inside. Mark and Chloe were just like any young couple, excited, full of dreams. They found this beautiful old Victorian, a real charmer. High ceilings, intricate crown molding, even a little turret. It had that smell of old wood and forgotten things, but they loved it, saw character. They poured their savings, their hearts, into it. New paint, new furniture, making it their own. They imagined a future there, kids running through the halls, laughter filling every room. But it wasn't long before the character started showing its true colors. First, it was small Steph. Chloe, home alone while Mark was at work, would swear she heard whispers. Just at the edge of hearing, like dry leaves skittering across a wooden floor. Or maybe the house settling, she'd tell herself. The old pipes, the wind. She'd brush it off, put on music, convince herself she was just being silly in a big, old house. Then Mark started noticing things too. Lights flickering, not just a gentle flicker, but a frantic dance, like something was messing with the circuit breaker. He'd check the panel, everything seemed fine. He'd blame the ancient wiring. But deep down he knew it felt different, more intentional, like a warning or a demand for attention. And the cold spots, walking through a perfectly warm room, suddenly, boom, a pocket of air so cold it makes your breath catch. Like someone left a freezer door open right next to you. And that smell, God, that smell. Like damp earth, old roses and something else, something cloying and sickly sweet. It would come and go, out of nowhere, especially in the master bedroom, then vanish just as quickly as it appeared. It was like the house itself was breathing, exhaling these forgotten scents, and they were breathing them in. Their dog Buster, a brave little terrier mix, usually full of boundless energy, started changing. He'd growl at empty corners, his hackles raised, a low, guttural rumble in his chest. He'd stare intently at spots in the hall, tail tucked, whimpering. And the master bedroom, he wouldn't even step a paw inside it. Not for treats, not for cuddles. He'd whine and scratch at the closed door, as if begging them not to go in, as if he knew what lurked within. The small stuff gave way to the not so small. Keys, left carefully on the hook by the door, would vanish, only to be found minutes later, lying on the floor in the kitchen. A teacup, set firmly on the counter, would slide a few inches, just enough to catch your eye. You'd think, did I bump it? But you knew you didn't. You were across the room. It was like a child playing a cruel, silent game. The sounds became clearer. Footsteps on the landing when both of them were downstairs. A faint, almost melodic child's giggle, echoing from the empty nursery they planned to turn into an office. Chloe would grab Mark's arm. Did you hear that? Mark would pretend it was nothing, but his eyes would dart around, too. The house was no longer just settling, it was alive. One night, Mark woke up with a gasp. A heavy antique book, one they'd found in the attic, was open on his chest. It was a collection of Victorian poetry, and it was open to a poem about profound grief, about loss. He swore he'd left it on the bedside table. His heart pounded. He looked at Chloe, sleeping peacefully beside him. Was he dreaming? But the book was real, tangible, heavy, lying there, a silent, chilling message. Chloe, on her way to the bathroom late one night, saw it. A fleeting shadow, a small, childlike figure darting across the hall, too fast, too ethereal to be real, yet utterly convincing. She froze, her blood turning to ice. She blinked, nothing, just the dark, silent hall. She sprinted back to bed, scrambling under the covers, shaking Mark awake, sobbing uncontrollably, and then the nightmares started. Not just bad dreams, but vivid, terrifying scenarios. A dark, faceless figure standing over their bed, watching them. A suffocating pressure on their chests. The sound of incessant, heartbroken weeping, seeping into their sleep. The terrifying part, they started having the same dreams, waking up at the same time, drenched in sweat, gasping for air, looking at each other with wide, haunted eyes. The house wasn't just affecting their waking hours. It was reaching into their sleep too, infecting their subconscious with its terror. This was it. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The house was wrong. Chloe, the more pragmatic one, decided they needed answers. She spent days, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of dread, digging through online archives, old newspaper clippings, local historical society forums. She had to know, and she found it. The story of the Miller family. Back in the 1930s, their house, was home to a family named Miller, a seemingly ordinary, happy family, until tragedy struck. Their youngest daughter, Lily, a sweet, delicate little girl, she got sick. A wasting illness, they called it back then. She suffered for months, and she died in that house, in their master bedroom. Imagine that, a child fading away in the very room they now slept in, a place they considered their sanctuary. But it didn't end there. The mother, consumed by grief, utterly broken, never recovered. She became a recluse, barely left the house. Neighbors whispered that she'd spend hours in Lily's room, talking to her, even though Lily was long gone. They said she would sing lullabies to an empty crib. She died a few years later, in the same room, a shattered woman, her heart broken beyond repair. The house became known as the Miller Place, and it sat empty for years after that, with everyone in town knowing its tragic history, its heartbreaking secret. Until Mark and Chloe, unknowingly, bought it, stepping right into a lingering nightmare. Chloe told Mark everything, her voice trembling, clutching the printouts of faded newspaper articles. The smell of old roses, the child's giggle, the weeping, it all clicked into place. Lily, the mother, they were still there, trapped, and they weren't happy about company. The house, now that its secrets were uncovered, stopped playing games. It became aggressive. It wanted them out. Or maybe it wanted something else. Something much, much worse. Buster was the first real casualty. One morning they found him whimpering, cowering under the kitchen table, his side covered in long, thin scratches. Not deep, but clearly deliberate, like someone had raked their fingernails across him. Mark and Chloe rushed him to the vet, hearts pounding. The vet said it looked like an animal attack, but they both knew. There was no other animal in that house capable of that, just them, and whatever else was there. That night, the fear reached its breaking point. Mark and Chloe were trying to sleep, or at least pretend to. Every creak, every groan of the old house was amplified, filled with dread. And then, it happened. A blood-curdling scream tore through the silence from downstairs. Not human, not exactly, but filled with such raw agony, such terror, that it chilled them to the bone. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of a child's mournful, heartbroken crying. Not a giggle this time, a genuine, gut-wrenching sob echoing through the house. They shot upright in bed, eyes wide with horror, grabbing each other's hands. What was that? Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark, pale as a ghost, swung his legs out of bed. We have to check. It was a terrible decision, but how could they not? The house demanded their attention. They crept down the stairs, every step feeling like a mile. The sound of the child's crying getting louder, more desperate. They reached the living room, the source of the scream, but found nothing. No broken objects, no signs of a struggle. Just silence. The crying stopped as abruptly as it began. They turned to go back upstairs, their hearts hammering against their ribs, and that's when their bedroom door, which they'd left wide open, slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The house groaned around them, a deep, guttural sound. The air in the hallway plummeted instantly to an arctic chill. Vapor plumed from their mouths as they breathed. Then they saw it, at the end of the hall, by the master bedroom door. A shadowy figure of a woman, indistinct, blurry at the edges, but radiating an unbearable despair. She was slowly turning towards them, and beside her, a smaller, fainter shadow, a child, just like Lily. The smell hit them then, overpowering, suffocating. Old roses, damp earth, and something metallic, like stale blood. It filled their lungs, choked them. And then, two voices, overlapping, ancient and dry, filled the silence. She's still here, always here. And a tiny, sorrowful mama, speaking at the same time, their pleas intertwined. The woman's shadowy hand began to reach towards them, slowly, deliberately, her form becoming slightly more solid, more menacing. Mark yelled, a raw primal sound of terror. He grabbed Chloe, pulling her towards the front door. They fumbled with the locks, their fingers numb with cold and fear. The door, it felt like it was stuck, resisting them, as if the house itself was trying to hold them captive, to make them part of its tragic history. They heard a faint, desperate "don't go" from behind them echoing down the hall. With a final, desperate shove, Mark burst the door open. They tumbled out onto the porch, gasping for air, choking on the fear, scrambling into their car, Buster whining frantically in the back. Mark floored the accelerator, not even bothering to look back at the dark, silent house that had once promised them a future. Now it only promised a grave. They drove for hours that night, just drove. Didn't know where they were going, just away. They ended up at Chloe's sister's place, miles away, collapsing onto the couch, minds shattered, souls utterly broken. They never went back to that house, not even to pack their things. They couldn't. The thought alone sent shivers down their spines, that deep, soul-crushing dread returning. They tried to sell it, of course, listed it online, with a sympathetic real estate agent who just thought it was too old-fashioned for young buyers. But it sat there for months. People would come, look around, and then call the agent saying they just had a bad feeling, a strange vibe, an unsettling coldness, a peculiar smell of old roses. Eventually, they practically gave it away. Didn't care about the money, they just needed it out of their lives. A year later, Chloe saw a local news snippet online. A quick blurb about strange lights and sounds reported by neighbors coming from the old Miller house, now empty again. The house that had once been theirs. It sent a fresh wave of terror through her, a cold dread that never truly left. Mark and Chloe moved into a small apartment, far from the suburbs, far from old Victorian houses. They built a new life, tried to forget, but some things just cling to you, like a shadow, like an echo. Sometimes, when the apartment is completely silent, when the lights are low, they both hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible child's giggle, or a whisper, just at the edge of hearing, carried on a cold draft that shouldn't be there. They'd look at each other, eyes wide, hearts hammering. A fear so profound, so deeply ingrained, that it had become a part of them, a permanent scar on their souls. They learned that some houses don't just hold secrets, they hold on to souls. And sometimes, those souls, they don't just stay in the house. Sometimes they follow you home, and they wait, always, just like the echoes in the walls, forever whispering, forever haunting.